Let's dive into one of history's most mind-bending contradictions, the Emperor Ashoka the Great. This is the story of how a ruler, famous for his absolute cruelty, somehow became a global icon of peace. So how does a person even make that kind of change? Let's get into it.
At the very center of Ashoka's story, you've got these two completely opposite identities. On one hand, you have Chanda Ashoka. That's Ashoka the Cruel, a guy known for pure brutality. And on the other, Dharma Ashoka, Ashoka the Righteous, a man who preached peace and nonviolence. The big question is, how on earth can these two be the same person?
To really get a handle on this paradox, you first have to understand the sheer scale of power this man had. He wasn't just some king. His official titles made him sound almost like a god walking on earth.
I mean, just listen to these titles. Emperor of Emperors, Beloved of the Gods, and my favorite, He who regards everyone with affection. Even his own name, Ashoka, literally means without sorrow. But as you're about to see, these grand, gentle titles were a million miles away from how he actually got his power.
Yeah, because before Ashoka became this beacon of peace, he was a warlord, and his path to the throne was paved with an unbelievable amount of blood. So picture this. His father, the king, dies back in 272 BC. But the path to the throne isn't clear at all, and Ashoka certainly wasn't the chosen one. So, what's his move? He starts a horrifying war against his own family, reportedly killing 6 of his own half-brothers just to wipe out the competition and grab the throne for himself.
His actions during this period were so utterly ruthless that he earned himself a nickname, and it's a terrifying one, Chanda Ashoka. It translates to Ashoka the Cruel. This wasn't just some smear campaign. It was a reputation he built himself, one body at a time.
And if you want to know just how deep this cruelty went, you just have to look at the legend of Ashoka's Hell. The stories say he built this incredibly elaborate torture chamber, a literal hell on earth designed for nothing but maximum pain. And this is the guy who's calling himself Beloved of the Gods.
But then, something happened. One single, devastating conflict that would completely shatter his entire worldview and sent him down a totally different path.
So, about 9 years into his rule, Ashoka turns his attention to the kingdom of Kalinga. It was a rich, powerful state, and it was pretty much the last piece of the puzzle he needed to complete his empire. And you better believe he was ready to take it by force.
The invasion of Kalinga was technically a military success, but the cost, the human cost, was just unimaginable. In this one horrific war, an estimated 100,000 people were killed. The battlefield was nothing but a sea of death.
And for what seems like the first time, Ashoka was forced to really look at the consequences of what he'd done. He killed his own family and didn't seem to lose any sleep over it. But this was different. He actually had his feelings carved into stone, describing this profound sense of remorse. The victory felt more like a defeat. This was the moment that broke him.
Completely haunted by the Kalinga War, Ashoka began this radical transformation that would change his legacy forever. He basically gave up on conquest by the sword and decided to try conquest by morality instead.
Now, this wasn't like flipping a switch. It was a slow process. He meets a Buddhist monk, starts to really study the teachings, and bit by bit, he starts to embrace its main ideas, especially nonviolence. Eventually, this led him to declare Buddhism the state religion, around 260 BCE.
But here's what's so important about what he did next. He didn't just force Buddhism on everyone. Instead, he promoted this concept called Dhamma. You can think of it as a universal code of ethics. It was a set of principles that anyone, from any faith, could live by.
And what was in this moral code? Well, for an emperor of his time, this stuff was absolutely revolutionary. Of course, there's nonviolence, or ahimsa, but then tolerance for all religions and sects. He commanded people to respect their elders and teachers, to treat servants humanely, and, get this, he made the welfare of the people an official responsibility of the state.
So you have this amazing new moral code. Great. But how in the world do you spread that message across a massive empire in the 3rd century BC? Ashoka's solution was both simple and brilliant. He carved his message right into the landscape.
He created what we now call the Ashokan Edicts. These were his teachings and his new laws inscribed for everybody to see. Dozens of these things have been found, carved into giant stone pillars and huge rock faces all across his empire, stretching from modern-day Afghanistan all the way down into southern India.
You know, for a long, long time, historians were kind of stumped.
most of the edicts only referred to the king as Devanopriya, that beloved of the gods title again. The discovery of the Maski edict was a total game changer, because it was the first one that actually used the name Ashoka. And just like that, they could finally confirm who this incredible reformer really was.
This slide really shows you just how big his ambitions were. This edict, found in what is now Kandahar in Afghanistan, was written in both Greek and Aramaic. That means Ashoka was actively trying to communicate his philosophy of Dhamma to the Greek-speaking world on his borders, translating his ideas for a totally different culture. It's just amazing.
So, what did this whole dramatic shift from ruthless conqueror to moral guide actually look like in practice? Well, Ashoka's transformation wasn't just talk. He fundamentally changed how he ruled his empire.
He really put his new philosophy into action. He sent Buddhist missionaries all over Asia to spread the teachings. He even sent his own son and daughter. He's credited with building thousands of stupas or Buddhist shrines. And then he did things that feel incredibly modern. He established hospitals for both people and animals. And he pushed for judicial reforms to try and create something like equality before the law. But here's the final, kind of ironic twist. Despite everything he did to unite his empire through this shared morality, it just didn't hold. After Ashoka died in 232 BCE, his massive empire began to crumble and decline, which makes you wonder if his unique vision could only be held together by him alone.
And this all brings us back to that central, fascinating paradox of his life. Ashoka's story leaves us with this huge, lingering question about power and redemption. Can a real, lasting legacy of peace ever truly be built on a foundation of such extreme violence? It's a question that, honestly, history is still trying to figure out.